face clearly and it's good. So, okay, let us try to zoom in a little bit. People were saying so, but it's maybe just a tiny little bit more. Perhaps is that zoomed in a little bit better and you can see us both? Okay, great. Okay. Yes, we do appreciate all this feedback because, frankly, most of you are at home, so it's important to have good picture for everyone. So thanks for your patience. Let's get started. Those again.
Oh, ta chiru kanga tashi dele tane ta tha rimbol kawaya ta so sane kawaya wa ina ta di anzo karse ta di tv ti ko ta ni wona was sa isa ka ki wondi was.
So Geshe said, firstly, Tashi Dele, greetings to all of our Dharma friends, no matter where you are, and also through the miracle of this television set, he is able to see all of you. So we should have the feeling that we are actually all together in the same place.
Oh, ta den chirende sta te ta ngaro so tane sane kawaya mar chewa mandi was. Oh, ta mali ya pom se ya botel ta novel le ya dise yi so much go yares.
And also in a way it doesn't really matter where we are because all of us share these really positive conditions, which is that we have this precious human body and we have also arrived at this jeweled island of the Dharma teaching. So in that way we are all together.
Oda ya novel lesere ta no jinga zo novel sere shi peji ro was oda slogan ne chi mares ngazo deshi nika ge deshi oda thadu ge deshi ronje kangi ge deshi yisa ge chala kanga soso nulo lo sabe de yares.
So when we talk about these jewels in the sense of the Dharma, right, we're obviously not talking about an external thing like a diamond or a sapphire. What we mean about being on these jeweled island is that we have all access to all of the things that we need to accumulate to be able to achieve not just temporary, but also ultimate lasting happiness.
Oda rignol pesu yar was pena go mai na yo. 다 마르세네 간저 자래 야보지 고유야 그 거로 차수 잘라 차수 야래 되는 걸 내가서 맞잖아 어떻게 자자바 이는 가디기나고 전라워지 고마래 되더라마도 뭐한테 지원 통 용이야 말이야.
But we have to make the most of this opportunity. So how do we make the most of this opportunity? Well, if we just kind of sit back and don't do anything, it's a little bit like wanting to have some butter, but leaving the cream or the milk unchurned, right? You know that the essence of the butter is in the milk, but you can't enjoy it, you can't appreciate it until the milk or the cream is churned correctly. So we have to engage in the work to make this human life worthwhile.
어다 rumba tombo텔로 소소 놀로는 니바 가리 요메 리자 치모 가리 요메 어다 대지사 로조신이야 보 싱고시소나 더니 뽑아도 된바 어다 가디이나요던 거를 깔레메바 다 뽑아도 된다 뭐지 저기 알았어.
So what we do actually is if we take a moment to consider this human life we have, and also to consider all of the potentials that we have within us, the potential for enlightenment, the potential for liberation, and so forth. We bring forth the courage or the brave attitude necessary, right, to take the essence of this human life, which is like the butter from the milk.
어다 리그널 피시도 몸보요 하레스 페지를 가로서 둘로 다 할레빈 임바다 뭐라 몸보지가 놀로라 어느 손지가 끝이 받은 여바이나 어다 데 코로 둘로도 같이 시험도 받아 그때 코스 통통 말아왔어.
So the potential that we have, though, it isn't realized. And the example that's given in the scriptures to be able to understand that is that the potential is a little bit like a Buddha statue that is covered in some old rags or in some old cloth. It's there, but we're not able to appreciate it or able to make use of it.
다 대노지 가로서 로제 요주지를 대노지지 야레스. 아까서 왔어. 어다 이나요. 가로서 로위다 니모도 다 대지가 거 아니라 대가서 카시마도는 대시 시워 통토 시워 좌토야 말이스.
And like that Buddha statue too, we have the Buddha nature, the potential for Buddhahood within us. But it is also covered not by rags or cloth, but by the adventitious defilements, by the afflictions.
다 텔은 안조 다 치료된다 사람들 다라와 다 치료지 나로서 놀로 손지 요아레스네 아주제 지자야레.
Yeah, and so Geshe says you don't often hear this in our tradition, meaning the Gelug tradition, but in a lot of other lineages, they already say the Buddha is already within us, right? It's like there's a Buddha here that we just don't know about.
매 제세 매바 말이 제세 요아레 제세 야보 요아레 제세 쳔보 요아레.
And Geshe said that maybe philosophically there's a slight disagreement with that, but he can't say that they don't have reasons for saying that, because actually there are some very compelling reasons for why that could be the case.
달라마 zon카바치나 다 손지 요세는 때에서 괜찮아레스. 손지 요세는 알아서 다 강에도 대만 요다 먹어도 야 강에 먹어요 봐 거의 요다 먹보지는 대대요 아이자 알아서 손지 요세는 저거 말했어.
But Lama Tsongkhapa has a bit of a different view, and why does he have that different view? Because Lama Tsongkhapa said if the Buddha is already there inside us, how can we explain all of the problems and obstacles and unpleasant feelings that we encounter, right?
하고서라와 당 안주 될 가르치고 손지가 리요 탑이 리요 손지 셈비 리세네 오다 될미다 요아레스.
So that's why he talks about the potential for Buddhahood, rik in the terms of potential, the potential for being a bodhisattva, the potential for liberation. So in Lama Tsongkhapa's teaching, he prefers to speak about these things as potentials.
오다 든디지 요아이자 거기도 왔다.
Yeah, kogidu.
다 든디지 요아이자 나로서 다 오다 지세 든디서 노토네라 다 가디나 버게 레로쇼로 만도지 뽑아도 된바.
So understanding these reasonings then, we can't allow laziness to keep us from cultivating the path, and we want to proceed in cultivating the teachings with a brave and courageous attitude. This is very important.
페나 무투타 페양간 좀 몬치아 고사라와스 페나 사고를 노브자치 모지요나 아니 다 노메텔 칼라야 보게 이내레 파마 이내레 가디나 소아초보 진에 데디키리지요 아레스.
So another analogy, which maybe some of you have heard before, but it's very useful, is you can think about a family that is living in abject poverty, but they don't know that in the basement of their house, covered by some earth, there is a jewel, and that jewel's value is so great that their issue of poverty would be completely cleared away.
어떤 노부팅 안디를 요새 말 사고는 끼게 자신이 요 말이 자가 말와.
And we also know from the jewel side, it's not like the jewel can say like, "Hey, I'm here. Come and get me," right? That's not going to happen.
어떤 노무티가 되고 요바다 하고 요 말했어. 뒷바라드 강에 되더라왔어.
So the family also just doesn't have the knowledge that it is sitting right there in the basement covered in some dust. And so they're continuing to experience that poverty.
당아주 단다 된다고 지자. 뒷바라드 강에 되더라마. 대체 뭐 신이를 봐. 여보 좋아서는 가디 이난 집에 봐. 뽑아도 된다.
So we are actually exactly like that poor family. We are in poverty because we don't recognize our inner potentials. If we recognize our potential for liberation, if we recognize our potential for enlightenment, we will no longer be in spiritual poverty, and we will be able to courageously work towards those attainments. And so, knowing this, understanding all of these potentials, then what we have to do is recognize our situation and courageously work towards achieving that liberation from samsara, from cyclic existence. And so, as we proceed with our motivation meditation, we want to be able to focus well. To do that, we need a mind that is peaceful and relaxed and a body that is at ease. We want the four elements to be in harmony. So let us just take a moment to set that in meditation. Oh, sorry. He's not done yet. Sorry. So Actually, these four elements, earth, fire, air, and water, right? These are very important. And in the Buddhist teachings, we actually talk about these four elements being within us, and also those four elements in the external environment. And the inner elements and the elements in the external environment are related. They are connected.
ngarusu litsa chimbo tsada ngi li sertsa chimbo da poja de to kale kale che che ba yina ani shi ge pani tane pe ja sono do salo yo ga do tengo tundo yo ares
야부고마서.
ngarusu lindi ge je zo de yo mo to mo ge sa ya kale kale ma che che na shi ge juwa sa do tendil tundo yo ares zipondi ge je
Ju.
And
so it is said that actually if you would break apart the physical components of the body and sort of look at the causes of this body, right? The substantial cause is related to those four elements. So this is something that's very important.
ta sedo ka dizel tisel ndewa chaba yimeta ta ya jangar mo che mo sungu ya re o te 세도 년도 내가 차야 돼.
수보당 년도 저 차야 되네. 그래.
뭐 시자라 지래 누와스 사도도 노지.
야야야.
맞아든 조안도는 세도 년도 내가 차서.
네. And so the potential of the physical components of the body are these elements, and then at the moment when the consciousness, His Holiness the Dalai Lama explains that the moment when the consciousness or when the mind is connected with those elements, then we have kind of the physical constituents that we know of beginning to form.
어따때 가이나면 때도 시인주와 그렇게 찬용하면은 간좀 멤버가 도더니 저기 노다르지 오통도 와스.
And also in terms of the importance of the four elements in the external environment, right? This is very easy to see. We can see how imbalances in the elements cause issues like floods, like fires, and so forth. So this is quite clear.
어따 노라요 세도 륜인데 와치 뭐야 이제 다 그마대와 차시나 아니 중앙 차만 여기 차서는 요다 용이 와레스.
And also, because of the four elements are such an important part of our body, when we have imbalances in the elements, this can also play out in terms of both physical and mental illnesses, right? So this is a very important principle.
So
to bring these four elements into harmony, why don't we take a moment to just do a short relaxation meditation?
limdewa se pge otola so batri yona cha timbal yongi teba noji jasi nyama noji pa rambaji te yendo du so much.
And think any sort of perturbations, sort of any disturbances of the mind, any discomfort in the body, these are just dissolving away, just like the clouds in the sky are dissolved by the rays of the sun.
보존노 진용마지 여바이나 콜레레 자자바이나 아니 좀마도 좀아니 여와셔노 여와서 된노지 어서요 선바지.
So just as if we have a glass with some particles or of sand or something in it, if we set that down and we still it, those particles float to the bottom and then the clarity of the water is restored. Similarly, as we settle our mind in stillness, all of the distractions are cleared away and we can restore clarity.
다 세 돈영을 대바이나 다 코시라데 여른 템바도 시라 여른도 더 메아이자 메이진 걸 다 템바도 시라 템보조 이텐데 메이지 그건데 선바지.
But we know that just from relaxing the mind in this state of stillness and clarity, we won't be able to improve our understanding. So what we need to do is we need to take an object of meditation so that we can then bring forth mindfulness and wisdom.
세코로 밑바용 세우도록 봐줘기 선바지.
So think, I'm going to rest my mind upon an object of focus. Mikpa semrebe.
야야.
And my object of focus is going to be the mind itself.
니비게 내서 가르 이나 봐주 주도 지금에.
I'm going to let go of any thoughts or regrets about the past.
마공비게 레와도 찾으라서 가르 여바 이나요. 니가 질 주도 지금에.
I'm going to set aside any hopes or plans about the future. Within this body, when we focus on the mind, we focus on the mind as being, in essence, pure luminosity. And in this way, because of its luminous and knowing nature, its clear and knowing nature, the mind is like a mirror that can reflect any object, anything that we want to understand.
대화 가리나요 더더와 강에 가리나요 매봐서 되게다 니봐요 그든지 잘하지요 선바지.
Because of the mind's capacity of being clear and knowing, it is able to bring forth the objects necessary to clear away suffering and to be able to establish a stable happiness.
다 버섯수바 시라 버섯수반도 가르도 년도로 와이나요 다시만로 돼야 그냥 저 여보지요 선바지.
Similarly, because of this clear and knowing nature of the mind, when we meditate on wisdom, we can bring forth eventually perfect wisdom. When we meditate on method, we can bring forth eventually perfect method.
럼바 이제다 대 손이 다시만로 해야지 내가 시기 될었더니 손제도 손제 삼바서이나 이실라 땜본제로 노.
And by doing this, we want to be able to perfectly bring forth the two accumulations of merit and wisdom, and we will request the blessings of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas to do that. Thanks. Yeah. Starting on page 3.
세 밑바서는 릴라보디요 아마르 코즈즈마 이자 건저그 주사메아 이제 릴라오면디 와스.
So Geshe said we tried a little bit of a meditation with the mind as an object, but he realizes that the mind as an object is difficult in meditation, right? Because the mind doesn't have form, of course. So it is a bit of a challenge.
럼바 이제 된자 고자는 건저 찌르더니 내초도 군토도 다 숑바도 니지르지 모시야질 배도 요아레스네 다 드리숭이 요아레스. 세 고자네 되는
But it is said that actually if we meditate on the mind and are just observing what's happening in the mind, this can actually establish a foundation for reducing unwholesome things like attachment and anger, and for bringing forth realization of what is positive, such as love and compassion.
세 고로그 드마 감각 컨트롤도 가리나에 세 고로그 오지 마이 봐. 로보와 예마치 당고시소 다대지 계속 지모레스.
And if we meditate and examine the nature of the mind too, we can have a direct experience of those teachings that state that the defilements, the afflictions, are not the nature of the mind. They are merely covering the mind. They are adventitious. So adventitious is kind of a hoity-toity word, which basically means they can be removed, right? Geshe was like, what does that hoity-toity mean? What's that? He's like, I'm talking nonsense. So we'll begin the prayers on that note. Tenpa chonden de dejin sheba dra chomba yonda bar zobe songye riba dang shabsu demba Devar Sheba Jiten Genba Kyebuduve Kalo Gyurwa Lanameba Ladam Hamgi Temba Sangye Chondende Pegyawa Shagya Tupala Chazelo Chede Kyabsu Chiho Tenpa Chomdende Dejin Sheba Drachomba Yandaba Zobe Sanje Riba Dang Shazu Demba Dewa Sheba Jiten Chemba Chebu Duwe Kalo Gyurwa Lana Meba Ladami Namgi Temba Sangye Chomdende Pejawa Shakya Tubala Chaselo Chede Kyabsu Chiho Tenpa Chomdende Dejin Sheba Drachomba Yandaba Zobe Sanje Riba Dang Shazu Demba Dewa Sheba Jiten Chemba Chebu Gyowe Kalo Gyurwa Lana Meba Ladami Namgi Temba Sangye Chomdende Pejawa Shakya Tubala Chaselo Chede Kyabsu Chiho. And now we'll go to the mandala offering. Just wanna Idam Guru Ratnam Mendalakam Niryatayami. So I think it's on page 28 in this book, the mandala as well as the refuge. So now refuge and bodhicitta.
Sonje chedan soje chenam la jangchu bardu dani gyabsu chi dagi chinyen gibe sonam ge jola penchir sanje drobar sho Sonje
Chedan sogi chenam lai Jiangche bardo dani gyabsu chi Dagi chenyen gibe sonam gi Drola penjir sangye droba sho Chedan sogi chenam lai Jiangche bardo dani gyabsu chi Dagi chenyen gibe sonam gi Drola penjir sangye droba sho
오야 다 대우 토마토네 세 아니 샤워 ngaros lega chaadi yapo jindo yak tenda ta kalon te kadina ka chemo.
So then, of course, at the beginning of the session, in order for everything to come about well within our mind, the motivation is extremely important.
다 손지도 손지 semba ta nganzu ta ya mochi ta mi ha ko yarwas korosina to nganzu do chipareten kalon jawato ta tene ramba je do ya pebares.
So, of course, all of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, they started out as ordinary beings, just like ourselves. And it was actually through motivation and dedication that the process of their transformation really started to begin.
다 손지 쪼덴데 있는 레지스 드라마 자와 shambala suba sud sina tambo da nga ya ngaros do chiparendu was siwores.
So it's really clear that these beings that we see that became holy now, like Buddha Shakyamuni, Tara, Maitreya, Manjushri, and so forth, they all started out as ordinary people just like ourselves. That's really important to understand.
다 미야 nganzu 노지다 밀이야 보치 또 다 tani ramba je ta koro to zumbo te gige zumbo te ta tani chini da ya pebares kanga.
So they started out as human beings like ourselves. They met good friends and came under good influence. They met teachers who were wise and knowing advisors, and then step by step they reached realization and enlightenment. That's how it happens.
다 야시 또 디세 가리나 메나 소솔 다 다리 디세 텔 야가 지 마이사 다 테툴라 또 메다 여보치 소 much.
So realizing that we have an opportunity to do just as they did, we should think today, in the class today, I don't want to waste my time, right? I want to make the most of this opportunity.
데레 다 대요 세야 보용 와셔 발라 다 알레세 처음에 바르진 고고치도 그거야 이제 쩌용이라 메시 비토니 다 데스 데 이스.
그래? 지경
지주소노ズメ 공연 세자니.
But as we listen to the teachings and try to bring forth these qualities within our mind, we know that there is the thief or the cheater of the distracting thoughts that can disturb us. So let's just take a moment to still any discursive thought within our mind, and we can just think about nothing in particular to begin. So let's do that.
세 tumban다고 그용반다고 할래야게 내스진 요하레.
The mind is vast, but it is also empty. There's nothing encumbering it.
대요 실로파도 이까라 노기 좀에 비춰와도 다 루두지바 바실로파도요 선바.
Dave, I think there's someone waiting to come in. So Geshe just said that as we breathe out, think that as we breathe out, any meaningless or distracting thoughts are being breathed out along with that stale air.
치템비가를 르츠마 다 가리나 다 야보지 칠레고요 선바.
And as we breathe in, think I am breathing in along with that fresh, pure air, whatever is wholesome.
대마송 디테스 관 파도 슈테스 체세.
So let's do that 3 times, and as we exhale, then when we breathe in, we can hold that for a moment, and then exhale again. So let's do that 3 times together.
라요더니 처음에 저와도 다 세도 어또도 가르 이나 류도 지바로 세게 가빈 넘바질 이 가르소는 도스
Again.
처음에 저와도 너돌아서 바게 가빈 넘바질 이 가르야 바지소
Boli
도스
karbo daboji.
라마 코인 바테
So then think that any of these discursive thoughts, any of these sort of distractions, they are together with our mind in the form of white light at about the level of our heart.
소소세 소노 또도가 다 자이노니 야 마시테 용가요 선바지
And think that slowly this mind, together with those discursive thoughts, rises within the central channel.
로긴 고이지 총비는 봐서 다시로 봐 대마도 폐에서 다때도 봐 너갈 자야와다 봐 이송 선바지
And we can imagine that we recite Pe, and this actually pushes the sphere of the mind up the central channel, through the aperture of the head, and that goes into the sky.
폐
Pe.
너가 뚱바띵 걸 봐야 이해는 치는 처음에 저와 너도 강한 저거 주자며 봐 좋아서 선바지
The mind, together with those discursive thoughts, dissolves into the vast expanse of the sky. And in this way, there is no discursive thought, no disturbance, nothing pinpointable at all.
롱게 세 조세나만데 다 이제 세미데 그용바 로지 뚜마 야 도녀가 헬레야 보 좋아서 선바지
And think that through this visualization now, I've been able to tap into this mind's potential of clear, knowing equanimity.
사지야 보던다 사베 가르 따바이나에 다 걸어 다 조조다고 들이야 보지 좋아서
And having tapped into that, then, this mind is the perfect field where I can plant the seeds for any positive mental quality that I want.
대용로 노안을 쳐봤던지 샹로그세야 보지 시다가 있었다
So the first seed that I'm going to plant is the meditation on that which allows us to abandon a mistaken path in favor of a correct path, which is the mind of refuge.
나로서 이치도 대화도 던지 템보야 보시바이네 손지 코로응네네 나로서 코아동에 수고 등화 유조리 토이 다 내가 차소 조차와 다시 맞이래 돼요.
And think that this refuge in the first jewel, in the Buddha jewel, this can be complete. It can be based on complete faith and confidence that the Buddha, through his own experience, has provided everything that we need to be able to be liberated from samsara and to perfect every positive quality.
생지 유주가 되는 손지지 공부 마도 받다 견조서를 샤스 때문으로 선바지
Think that until every last sentient being has reached enlightenment, I will continuously go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
던지 다 샹로 때모 여비 돈에다 생지 유주가 돼 벌써 주바지 저기 선바지
From establishing this refuge in a firm way within my mind, I now have the support that I need to work towards placing every sentient being in a state of happiness. To work for the welfare of sentient beings in a meaningful way.
손지 또된데 이날에 이제 드라마 자와 샴바서 이나요 다 걸어서 짜 치셔서 돼야 되는 거를 주고 생지 요조들해야 돼요. 걸어서 짜 치셔서 해야 돼. 어느 생지를 지려야 돼요.
Whether we talk about the Bhagavan Buddha Shakyamuni, whether we talk about Tara, whether we talk about Maitreya, their primary concern, their abiding concern, is the welfare of all 6 types of sentient beings. So we want to be like them, right? So from our side, we have to cultivate this appreciation and concern with the welfare of sentient beings. At minimum, to start on this path, we have to have a firm decision. I will not harm any sentient being whatsoever as a minimum, and I will try only to benefit them. But we also understand that practically, to lead beings towards their welfare and happiness in a big way, I won't be able to do that until I achieve enlightenment so that I can lead them to what I have achieved. Therefore, for the sake of all sentient beings, may I achieve Buddhahood. Meditate on bodhicitta. So we'll pause there. Yeah. So we focused a little bit on sentient beings here, Geshe said, because actually the Bodhisattvacharyavatara, Shantideva and the Bodhisattvacharyavatara, in other texts they identify this problem, right? When we think about the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, we're just like, oh, they're so wonderful, and we prostrate and we make offerings. But we don't have that same feeling of abiding respect for sentient beings, do we? Right? The texts mention that. But actually, we could argue that the real offering, because as we said, the Buddhas have this abiding concern for sentient beings, if we make even just a small morsel of food offering to an insect, to an ant, that is something that is going to bring us closer to the Buddhas.
pena social charge si orient was ngaro so cha cheju tse dia so so pagi inare so so ta diru inare nom cha cheju ji yon tele jenda ji te ze ro ba chi ba yina so so gawa yung garo was.
And think about how these Buddhas are thinking. So let's try to think of an analogy. If you have a child or a really close friend, somebody that you really care about, if they're in trouble and somebody else helps them, the help that that other person gives them is something that makes you feel really pleased and happy, isn't it?
Oh, ta te de chi ba chi jo re se yares. So ji do shonje samba so nyeri cha ni ma yi cha senche yozu te koro so sel cha chi ju de re de yares.
So that's how the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas feel when we help any sentient being, even in the smallest way. And we really mean any sentient being, because of course they don't hold sentient beings near and far. They don't have those kind of biased attitudes.
Oh, ta ngaro so de azu jare la ka che de te ta tendi ji senche yozu te nobel ya ji nobel li jo la ba chi thon thoya che te la ka che yares.
So this whole kind of meditation and thinking in this way, we're just trying to bring forth that awareness. We talk about precious wish-fulfilling jewels a lot. We also want to see every sentient being as a precious wish-fulfilling jewel. And it's not really easy, is it? Let's face it. So it's not a small job, it's a big job, but we have to work towards it. Yeah, yeah. So if we say that I want to see all sentient beings as a precious wish-fulfilling jewel, but the people that are around us every day and that we encounter every day, if we're not able to improve the relationships with them, we haven't yet been successful, have we? Right? So we know this won't come about right away. So once again, we turn to the Bodhisattvacharyavatara. train in stages, right? That's doable, right? We train in stages. We go step by step.
매매 다때들이 가서 해야 된다고 첨보르다. 스트리 로조지래 텐데 대와지래 니가 돈 좋아요. 왔어.
So these preliminaries, Geshe said, they're actually very much related to the topics that he'll be teaching on today. So we're starting this new text on the lojong, the mind training, as well as continuing with Lama Tsongkhapa's dependent arising. So these principles are very much connected to both the meaning of both of those texts.
로조 대디마 서 파타는 내서 디마도요 말에 되는 수지가 까대지가 내서 차소도는 요아르세요.
And in particular, the 7-point lojong, or the 7-point mind training, is very, very precious because nominally there's only kind of 7 main points. But the great masters say that actually all of the Buddha's teachings, everything he taught, is contained within those 7.
다 메코로 로종 세계도 왔어. 로종스는 다야 실로 말은 알아서 노로고 로세고 세트세요. 알아봐. 세족이 세요. 알아서 가서.
So lo here, in the sense, it means mind training. So we understand that what we are training is not related to those outer circumstances, but it is an inner training of the mind.
하고 살아왔어. 어다 세종세리 세조마족이 어다 세다 좀 해봐지. 파죠. 세도 요아르도니 다시 저 비타버지 레기 있어요.
So when we say train the mind, we can think of that as a process of purification, right? To steer the mind away from meaningless things and to bring forth what is meaningful. I think Marta's trying to get in again. So to steer the mind clear of those meaningful things and to bring forth what is meaningful.
다 내일 그 야시부터 봐서 이나요. 다 이제 로지지 수고 요아르테 같이 버레스. 다
Lojue.
로지지 로지지.
So also related to this, actually, there is a story that the holy beings have shared that is quite important.
당금마 자갈했더니 자보질다 다 자보를 버근다만 시에게 왔어. 버그 부모지 시와레스.
Yeah, so this is a story about a king who gave birth to a daughter in India in ancient times.
다시 파시 손지샤 유비칼이 이사레스.
And this is probably also at the time when the Buddha Bhagavan was abiding in this world.
아니 다 버그 대시찬에 버그 부모되니 이제 다 그 할레비 나자치는 도야메게 나zo 나서 뒤좌지.
Loso. And this daughter, she had a terrible illness, right? The illness known as leprosy that was affecting all of her skin and her limbs.
다야 콘조또 쳔버레 자버레 때는 이나요 콜다 뭐도뇨도 되나는 나자젠달은 기뇨도 먹어요 알아왔어.
And they were a rich, wealthy family, right? She was the daughter of the king. Yet they couldn't do much, and even they had to isolate her, of course, because there was the fear of her transmitting that illness to other people, right? In that time, it was believed.
좋아. 다 드니치네 다 코로 다 소소치보 대그요 아이사 다 멀리요 버테세나 만데 멀리요 버세스나 만데 어떤 뭐세요 버테 툴라도야 만데 대도 대마서 그건 늘 손바치.
So
셀시니.
she was spending time alone, and she was thinking, okay, these are my circumstances, but I don't want to waste this opportunity of a human life, right? I want to try to make something meaningful of it, regardless of the circumstances.
다 드니 다 로조가 맹아르지 다 그렇게 지진 쇼어지러 왔어. 그래서 손지산이라 깔아뭐 보여지래 다 드니 로조가 뇨래지네라 다내 강가파트 타마 이들 다좀이 공부도 받는 쉬어야.
And it is said that actually she made requests for teachings, and somehow she was able to receive the Lojong teachings. And she enacted such a powerful transformation in her mind that not only was her leprosy cured, but she was able to achieve the state of a foe destroyer in that very lifetime.
다시 예레지샤 니스진네는 유니게 네스테 다티 gelomapa 모사네 마지바레 그래서 어떤지는 로지와레스.
And her continuum, actually, yeah, so I don't, the Sangye Yope couple of Marenga Chena Jelare. So Geshe, when I heard who it was, I was like, I don't think this is the time of the Buddha. This is a little later. Geshe was like, yeah, no, you're probably right. So at the time that she was cured of that leprosy, she had a vision of Avalokiteshvara, of Chenrezi, and she composed a practice known as abiding with less, the Nyungne purification practice. And who was this person? It was Bhikshuni Shri. right? She became the nun known as Bhikshuni Shri or Gelongma Palmo.
어디 다다이나요. 다 뉴네 버게 피다 버지 동안 셔발라 시레지 오 그거야. 시레지 오 시위 깔아. 겔로마 파모지네 시레지 하시고요. somba 그거레스.
And so to this day, right, when we do the Nyungne practice, we know that to engage fully, we want to receive the Chenrezi empowerment. And to this day, for most of the lineages of those empowerments, the lamas actually first make the request to Gelongma Palmo. So they go through Gelongma Palmo to be able to channel the blessings of Chenrezi or Avalokiteshvara in the empowerment.
다때 로조 기파트린 디와스 로조 세조 서서 버게 따따진 로소나. 쟁에 조를 샤와 누르 마보 용기와 코 나자 뒤자데 쟁에 바트 조를 샤송와스.
So that's why we need to train the mind. That's why we need to transform the mind. And through that transformation, what capacity do we achieve? We achieve the capacity to transform obstacles into the path. Just as Gelongma Palmo, Bhikshuni Lakshmi, she was able to transform obstacles into the path.
다 로조도 다 던지가리네 다 딜로지데 조존데 다 버게 야 지용기와레 소 제제 제모야와스.
So often actually when somebody begins some Lojong teachings, this a story of Bhikshuni Lakshmi, of Gelongma Palmo is told as a means of encouragement.
다 로조데 대신 거 주기 단디야.
So now we will turn actually to the actual text of the Lojong. So don't worry, it's very simple. If you don't have the text in front of you, I'll read as we go. It's very simple, so you'll be able to follow.
다 체제도 마수는 다 될다 쪼쪼데 다른 저야 라마슬림바 조지바데 아트샤 아니 다 버게 사자 가와레 인도네시아를 저 라마슬림바 지갈페 어다 로주니를 tani kale janel nyondo go janel 다 티치네 다 명어를 지티네마 용아레스.
So these instructions, right, they are from Chekawa, but they actually trace their lineage back to Atisha. And they are related to the instructions for mind training and arising the mind of awakening that he achieved from Serlingpa, Suvarnadvipi. So Serlingpa was named after the place where he lived, which was the Golden Isle, which is probably Indonesia.
어다 명아 돈보도 손지코로 도그는 요하라 와 스타티니메자 바지 데지네 라마슬림바사는 조지니메자 로템바 로템바니 포토아니 샤라와스 다른 바지다 요하레스.
So these lineage of instructions, actually we could make the argument that the original sort of place where you find these instructions is in the teaching of the Buddha. But in this case, the close lineage, it goes to Serlingpa or Sudvarnadvipi. Then it goes to Atisha. Atisha passed these to his great lay disciple, Drum or Drum Tunpa. And then it went through various of the important Kadampa Geshes, such as Potawa, Sharawa, and so forth. And actually, this is a lineage of realization in that all of the masters who the Lojong teachings passed through, they realized the essence of those teachings as realization. The other thing that is interesting here is that the Lojong teachings weren't written down at first. They existed only as oral instructions that went from the lips to the ear.
다지마지마타네 야 샤라와살레 그딜 단데 마고파나 다 뇨로사레 소노토네 다파 베자소야 트릭 로지와레스.
But by the time they came to Sharawa, Sharawa was concerned that the lineage of these teachings could die out. So there started to be the idea that they should be written down.
텐디바치 다 대용 단데 자와 자이치 텔라트만다와 테테제 용기야 다테 간디 지마칼레 간스 다기.
자위식스나?
야 또 로제테데마 자치지와라와.
알레,
치치테테즈마다와 지와레스.
And so Geshe said that also what you'll find is with the 7-point Lojong or mind training, there are some different renditions of the text. So in some of the texts there's like a preliminary verse, but in a lot of the texts there isn't. So we can come to a discussion as we go along with the teachings.
어다들이 알랭엔로 대엔로 세나마들 마동보데 이사 다 체제들하고 투지 첨보로 šansal로 이지 첨보로 šansal로 사지와레스.
But we could say that nominally the text begins with a verse of prostration. I prostrate to great compassion. I prostrate to great compassion.
디소와 어다 전에 르바니바 텔레테네 다 치람 거와체 도제니마 지시저 선데 로조고 테도 맹아테 도제 돈라와 nyama dondawa, meg Geshe dondawa, yes, and the yares.
And in some texts, not in most of the texts in English, unfortunately, but in some texts, it gives an analogy of these instructions as being like the sun, as being like an indestructible vajra. Nima dang dorje, rwa?
Nyama doje, meg Geshe, meg shitachembo, meg shing.
And being like a healing medicinal tree. So it compares these teachings to the great sun, the indestructible vajra, and the healing medicinal tree.
Ta alete motesia bayina, doje dondawa zalagate, pena layumbo jaj, pete jaguares, layumbo jaj, chuan doje juares.
Ale la wang shu
Layumbo jaj, yaji, layumbo jaj. Ta la unshi sena teji ropa layumbo jaj sa juara, jaj, yashin,
jachu.
no,
80.
layumbo jaj.
Ale.
Layumbo ta lay jaboja wachi juares.
Ale, loso.
Devi lay jabochi.
Loso, de kam gila. Ale. So anyway, I'm sorry, I don't understand the name of this deity, but there is a god of the desire realm.
So hakor, la tsumba, jaj.
Latsangpa, rwa.
And jaj.
Ale, Ishvara. Thank you. Sorry, it's Ishvara. Geshe was like, how do you not know that? Well, there's a lot of Vedic gods, but I was confused if it was Brahma or Ishvara or Shiva or who it was, but it's Ishvara. And he holds a vajra, which allows him to rule over the desire realm. And this is known as the indestructible vajra.
Ta rei jabor rag tela ta shi ya shi shidu momoyar was shidu.
Shinto.
Shidu shi momoyar.
Loso.
Ta hadal hamayin ta te tendal momo jagyar.
And where these various deities are abiding, so Ishvara along with the gods, and then underneath them we know there's that realm of the asuras or the demigods. This is said to be towards the top of Mount Meru in Buddhist cosmology. And as you come to the summit of Mount Meru, it's not like most mountains in that there's a lot of trees with beautiful fruits and other wealth. And so the asuras, right, the demigods, and the devas, the gods, they fall into a lot of conflicts and even wars over that wealth.
Shidu te shesa de laile yo sara istene tene ribute ma ko mama le gitela samay suksado ya.
And the problem, Geshe said, it's a little bit like the fights that we have over rivers, because what happens is the trees are actually in the deva, in the god realm, but the fruit that falls from the trees usually falls into the demigod realm. So this is the cause of a lot of conflict.
Ta tanda yina sajal nyota mo yo ara was ten noji.
Yeah.
Korosuni mo ja.
Re.
Tal hamaye teze tonsol hamaye to do was.
Yeah.
Hamaye to larji shoni la.
Yeah.
Tama layumbo jajal le do yares.
Ale. So when the demigods are starting to want to kind of take the trees for themselves, right? They start encroaching into the god realms. And there becomes a time of danger when there could be a lot of demigods taking over parts of the deva realm. And at that time, it is said that Ishvara, right, who we're calling the king of the gods in this context, Ishvara appears.
Tene tama lai thag thoya de lai umbo jaji shwana yo dojete ko ni pachimbo chi dojete uyung yares.
And so how he defeats those demigods who are encroaching into those realms is he wields his indestructible vajra. And some places they say that he actually throws that indestructible vajra.
Ta tel ale pe rapa chi res to ya pe lila wo chi ja ba yin ta te dun rawa se na mandu ta ngarusul mgya ta se shi kari ina pa meba zo thoya ge ne chi dun rawa isa doje dun rawas.
So the example here is that the capacity of the mind training teachings to be able to defeat the enemy of the afflictions is as powerful as that indestructible vajra.
Ngarusul ko do nge so ge dunga yo zo chi thoki te shelo da che ne mandu no lo dan was.
And we know that the enemy that we're talking about here, what keeps us within samsara, and what can drag us to those lower unfortunate realms of existence, it is that inner enemy, isn't it? So that's what this indestructible vajra can defeat.
Otan zombali kangi jabon rawa me thoba ina te pe to mandi. Otan zombali chala kanga rawa ina ta pe to mandi no date me bazo thog mandi was.
So even if we were like friends with the king or the prime minister or the president or whatever, even if we were able to call in an army or if we possessed a big portion of the wealth of this world, none of that would help us to defeat the inner enemy of our afflictions, right? We need something else.
어떤 가로서이나 시와 몽볼을 탈탈하이 잡아먹고 시와래 사실 배도 주요 말이스.
In fact, it said that in rebirths before, we have possibly been the king of the gods ourselves, right? We may have been in incarnations where we were the king of the gods ourselves. And even that power that we achieved back then, it hasn't helped us defeat this inner enemy of the afflictions.
어따 거의 강에 강가 좋게 놀어요. 이사 다 뒤다 강가 싸워도 열어도 집안 매봐 좋게데. 어저 좋게 될다 내스테 peta lojo menga te de la ten zo to yo ase.
However, what can help us to escape samsara, what can help us to get rid of the afflictions from their very root, all of that information is said to be included in the 7-point Lojong mind training instruction.
ta tari pe chi ye cha so wa stage temba zo ko yo gelo ma pa mo ale nga zo masel the manyu anda ba kange chi test ne jenge tol sha ne lo kheso chi mo ro so was.
Yeah. So let's think about ourselves and compare ourselves to Gelong Mapalmo. She had leprosy, okay? That's probably a serious problem, the likes of which most of us have not experienced. Through these teachings, she was able to transform her life and eventually overcome her illness and achieve realization. So definitely, we can use these to solve our problems, isn't it?
nganzo ina kange cheju kandis theba ina ngeso ge ta shewa roya ge netse le mombo chi yar tin dribu tanda yong ge yar hale me so ma sa kale kale tani powa ge yar.
It is said that through the principles of mind training, even some of the most difficult situations in our life, we can completely transform our way of thinking about it. So, for example, when we have a really, really serious obstacle that's causing us tremendous suffering, we can think, this is karma that actually could have led me to the lower realms. But through experiencing it as an unpleasant thing right now, I am purifying that karma.
ta diswa ta nyama to dawa pena nyama ti chuke chi sha ge del mamba kar ina ko pagen zegu chu sa me ba ko ino ge diwas mamba
like the sun. So we did the indestructible Vajra. These teachings, these mind trainings are like the sun. The sun in the sense that if we think of ignorance as being darkness, when the sun rises, that darkness is completely cleared away. So these teachings are like the sun.
nyame ge ze ti ta shido ta me do do ter ji ta ya shido do te ji gol se lesson kale ya me yong yares.
And also through the power of the sun, all of the good qualities, like the fruits and the things that can be enjoyed from the trees, these are ripened and those edibles are brought forth. In the same way, all the positive qualities of the mind can be brought forth through these Lojong teachings.
ta so so ro to shin te do chi ba cha te le chu ha ba na bo chi yar was so si jo.
So really, these instructions are more precious even than that. So they are something so very useful to us.
ta me ge je shi don da wa sa me ge je shi ji ta je shi te la te ne ta me mo bo ya pa te yong ga was te la te ne mo se ka nge mo bo chi ko sa yong yares.
So like a medicinal tree, right? We know that these Lojong teachings, these mind transformation teachings, these sicknesses within the mind, the sicknesses of the afflictions, every single one of them can be completely healed. So in this way, they are like a medicinal tree.
ta ne se tendi ale te nge le yares lo ju ka shi ngo la.
Yeah, so Geshe was just explaining, actually, we looked at several different texts in English translation. I looked at the FPMT one and also the Lotsawa House one. And I couldn't find one. This is why we don't have a text ready. I kept convincing myself I'll find one with this beautiful analogy of the rays of the sun, of the indestructible Vajra, and of the medicinal tree. But I haven't been able to find that. If anybody knows where that is in English, please send it over to me, and that's the translation we'll use.
this one ta lo ju te ta ti ji leng ne te ta ne tel te de ma tu ya ma ne di ro was ka de te ta to mo ngen ro la ba ni ba ngi ji shon ju se la ba.
So the first part then, when we come to the actual text, and as we said, it's divided into kind of 7 basic points. The first one is to train in the preliminaries. So train in the preliminaries.
samba ane chenye lo de chewas
Nipati karere konda chambaji.
ni ba ngi shon ju se ju
So the first is train in the preliminaries.
me to mo nga ko so pas mar da
Ngodrup.
ngendro terwa
Nipati.
ngi shonju se
The second one is about training in bodhicitta.
shonju se ni da yongwa de res yongwa de
Sumbadi.
hakoso shonju se ni la imbe
And those are the two bodhicittas, both relative and ultimate.
samba chenge lo de chenge shonju lo de jawa samba chenge shonju lo de jawa
The third is being able to bring obstacles onto the path. We could also say transform obstacles into the path.
jiwa chechi ge da nyole jawa isayo ajina
The fourth is the practice of one lifetime.
ani lo jung che
Then the measure of having trained one's mind.
da chi chen no yo na gonda che
So Geshe said he's doing all of this from memory. So if he gets the order wrong, you guys have to speak up and tell us. But so far, I think he's doing pretty good, at least from my knowledge.
ngendo isa ale shushu la yo gro ani lo jo ge ton se
And then the training or the precepts of the mind training.
lo jo ge la ja
And then the advice of the mind training or the recommendations of the mind training.
ta ta shi di di je ta mu chi chen mo ta na sa da mo
So Geshe said he thinks that's 7. If there's an extraneous, if there's an extra one, apologies.
ta pa shi te di di is di de ne di yar wa di ndo so wa ta te di ten do ge yar te di to ne to mo ngen do ta la shi to ja chen bor ta di la bo te la gis
So those are the 7, and the first one, first train in the preliminaries. Actually, just from that one sentence, there is a very vast meaning, but we'll just give a very sort of Geshe said accessible intro to that.
shi to ngen do la ta lo sa sa du jo chi tu sa ka le yo gro wa te ji wo shi chu re
So train in the preliminaries, we could talk about this as training in the 3 paths. We could also talk about it in terms of the jorwe chutruk, right? The 6 preparatory practices. Those could all be included under here.
lo so wo yo re ngen do te ngen zo lo
Yeah. And so when we talk about the 3 paths, right, that's in the sense of the 3 principles of the path. So definite emergence or renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness.
ta ji wo ka le yo gre ta te ji ta ji wo zo ne te re ta de da du la ba yin zo no ne zo te ka re se ngen do te ta ngi ma che ya bo te le la wo ma re ta nye ka wa ta ya yo ta nye ka wa de che wa ta ri so no to ne ta de chu la to ne chen ne ge mo du so ba tem bo ngen do zo te re su ya
But the main preliminary, as is explained in many commentaries, is actually understanding the preciousness of this human life. For the reasoning that it is rare, it's difficult to find, and also that it is supremely meaningful.
하고서래 다 야대 내가 첨부 제마토나 다 대출로 첨부 세나 첨부를 som바 템보 당연히 쪼데 되랬습니다.
So the main preliminary is thinking, I have this human life. It is something that is so precious and valuable. If I don't do something to make it meaningful, that is a tremendous loss, right?
And
Geshe said it's easy to feel like that for 1 or 2 days, isn't it? Oh, I'm practicing Dharma and making the most of my human life. But to maintain that for many, many, many days, that's something a little bit more difficult, isn't it? Oh, true. But what we want is that recognition and that appreciation in a steady way. So maybe not like these kind of overwhelming bursts of inspiration, but think more of like a river of inspiration, a gently flowing river that continues all the way until it meets the ocean. So an inspiration that continues all the way until we reach the shore of enlightenment. Think of it like that. Yeah. But right now, what's our inspiration like, right? And we feel this, isn't it? Like when we have a practice that we're excited about, it's more like the waves on the ocean. So we have like this huge wave that kind of crests, and then it falls back, and then we're flat again, right? It feels like that with practice a lot of this, right? Yeah. At one point, right, when the wave is kind of cresting, it seems so big and powerful, but there's not any kind of power of continuity there. So once the wave crashes, the ocean is flat again. So that's what bursts of inspiration are like. So rather than having bursts of inspiration, what we want to do is have a continuum of consistency. A continuum of consistency in our Dharma practice that is like a river.
당연히 쪼듯이 사기 디세나먼데 대던 대화 여긴 로템바 당게 조지가 로템바 노송아스
좀 템발라. 알레.
로조고 명아테.
로소. So that is Geshe-la's brief teaching on the first of these 7, which is train in the preliminaries. And related to this, because we talked about the source of instructions, Geshe-la wants to relate a story between Atisha and Dromtunpa.
로템방가마 벨레진데 다케로 쳔보레라만 요레 다 필로조 다체 야본다고 데라와스 말레체케 다코 겜바도 겜발 다 치시간 로요 아레스 통솔
로소
다 단달라마 지페바 노지
So Dromtunpa, he was like, we could say the preeminent, right? Like the most respected disciple of Atisha. And because he was so respected, he was kind of considered like the king of Dharma in a way. And he would often be invited to monasteries and things, just like the great lamas do teaching tours, right? So he would teach in many different places.
다른 못다던 것만이 파시 야마라와스 베 다이나 따따도 든디 마시는 거 가디는 거 맞아는 페노 아레스.
And but he was also ascetic. He was also austere in the sense of like, okay, yes, they didn't have cars or things to take people around, but they did have horses and palanquins. But it is said that when he was going somewhere to teach, Dromtunpa would always walk, actually. He would walk.
tene nyama chi phen robe ka chire gemba teso tadi chimbozo tu du jalu hale ke ra chimbozo no gude arwas pa rimbo chine ko matez lo chimbo chi tu ares
Ale. So one day, as Dromtunpa was walking towards a monastery where he was going to be teaching, in the distance he could see people with the silk brocades and the victory banners and this kind of very elaborate setup to welcome him. And as he was walking towards the monastery, he bumped into an old man, Pochik.
lote chi mo da chi ta ki chala mombo ke ya isa ta ko longa ni kale khanya tane ya rote ma thiwa isa ko roba zoro chi skoni ke che ane ki chala kroche rote ma.
And the old man, he was there because he was actually carrying a heavy burden, a heavy load. And Dromtunpa, seeing that, he took pity upon him and he said, give me these things and I'll carry them for you until you get to where you need to go.
Ta kin ta rote mi son ta nga te ji zala ba yin ko shen ni ki ga chala ke chi mare tene ngoro ba zo thogo mare ngala la matandi ji isa na
Ale loso
ko la ba yin po te nga chala ke chi mare was
Ale loso
tene ngero ko ro ba zo thogo mare
suropa so tugi mare
chala kro chi ro ro ba
yeah
tene kim ko ngala ma yi zala ba yina
yeah
ki chala ke chi mare wa tene ko pe do zo thogo mare wa.
And so Dromtunpa also knew that if he told this man who he was, right, that he was a lama, that he was the teacher of the Dharma, the man wouldn't be comfortable with him carrying his load, and then he wouldn't be able to benefit him.
아니 그 다가 전에 바 마지 눈도 좀 로야 했으면도 아니 건조질 거 보다 깔래 칸이 코로 후고 지고 잡았더니 야 쇼스
Ale
근데 지고 잡았더니 걸 그치기 야
Ale loso. And so he thought, as we come closer to the monastery, right, people might recognize who he was, and then the person who he was helping would feel uncomfortable. So he wanted to appear as an ordinary person. So what he did was actually he took a pair of old shoes and he was carrying those in his hand, right? He was carrying the old man's shoes.
어다 잘라 그 쇼야 롱고도 강가 키로 받치는 내 노템에 그 로바존에 용기야 해서 롱가라.
Yeah, so he was carrying these shoes and on his back a lot of the other possessions of this man.
tene gem마도 타니 월을 담디 하고는 그러was tene 코 피피티 수마레스
Ale.
보데
Three somewhere isn't
다 gem마도 타니 월을 공공차 그러와
Yeah.
다 콜라만 쳔보리나 다디서 데여와
Yeah.
이 하고 용 그러와
Ale.
tene 코 티수마레스
Loso. But as they were approaching, right, the old man thought, who are these people lining up to greet? And at that moment, he became very embarrassed because he realized that actually the person carrying his heavy burden was a great Dharma teacher, and he kind of wanted to run away.
매매 된다 내가 쟁에 로드 채와 하고 살아와 다 로드만 요추 지내라.
Yeah, yeah.
별로 야 펜바 지레선 펜바 더 말했어.
Yes, yes, yes.
기선수 때마도 요 말 거기 같이 늦어서 근데 드니 선수 요 말 왔어.
Yes, 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 yes. 콜 함국 된 소태요.
가리나 그토네 콜 로바서 더 요 왔어.
Yeah. And so, of course, the man, he felt really bad, especially having given the shoes to him to carry. gondanga donda gyabo koma son tanda bet chuksason. Ko karichene lamdu kerwa drum tumpa kelen saredua lam ko
세시오 가리나 코론 요추 지내라 펜바 더 손을 걸어 계속하고 요 왔어.
Yeah. 하고
센절 펜바 더 손을 걸어 요래 데려 왔어.
Yeah.
가자 메바 펜바 돼야 되자.
Tene lamko carry.
가리나 잘라 간가 큰 요담만 왔어. 된다.
So Drumtumpa was such a person that despite the position, despite the man's embarrassment, he was willing to carry his shoes because he was a true practitioner of the mind training who whenever he saw someone in difficulty, whenever he saw an obstacle, he wanted to be able to take that obstacle into the path, even if it was someone else's.
다 된다 강에 체주 간데 주요 태바 이나에 된다 녀를 쩌토바 이나 쟁에 론드 채와 공도질 차용 거 알았어.
So in this way, we can understand that whatever obstacle we perceive, whether of ourselves or others, no matter how heavy, we can transform this obstacle into the path.
다 알레트리 데로주가 까나 버티데 텐디지.
So this was a brief sort of beginning taste of these Lojong teachings, and of course, we're going to continue these in the coming Sunday sessions.
당년도 세다 다시도 년도 뭐야 할래 같이 뭐래스. 빼나가로서 칼라 알레 니마지 칼라 테마지 벌써 봐 잡아라요. 요와드 가지 같이 먹으건디스.
So, of course, the preliminaries are very important because we know that even if we just think about the food for one day or even a single meal, think about all the preparation that we have to go to make sure that the meal comes out nicely.
다 땡데세 대야 내시 제저마 가제트도 셀샤소나. 근데 요아 강가 같이 모여 막 하고 용 그래스.
Yeah. And in fact, in this way, when we understand that the result depends upon its causes, we see that relationship of dependent arising. And actually, this way, we can think that if I understand dependent arising a little bit, I'll appreciate the preliminaries more as a cause of the actual practice, because the preliminaries are one of the causes that lead to the arising. So in this way, we will turn to our discussion of the dependent arising. That's in Drati Basin at the Kawi Mihamko. Tene Chunge Gimsengi. Ale. Dile ngosa gebada.
Dile medo shunga ka tsende chela tenana temban juju yedama ngayina teji.
So we are on verse 21, and I'm sorry if you'll bear with me. I think the translation that we're using could confuse people here. So I'm going to give you the meaning as sort of I see it in a better way. Geshe said, "Don't talk too much." My apologies. Just in case you're like, "What's he talking about?" So. What could be more amazing than this, or what could be more wonderful? There is no other genuine way of praising you than this.
다 통제 간디지나 때는 유아지라마도 롱와 때는 만두 롱지지 잡아 때는 만두 세아테 다 뭐사 첨보 할렐루야 첨보 네스지레스. 이시타지
니시사치 딜레 모처 요르파당
치토지 땡데레 땡주레 사주아라 와스 어다 땡 뭐차 첨보 할레베트네 야 첨보 텔리다 야 첨보지 가야 자치가 좀 만두라고.
So, you know, in this way, this kind of thing, this relationship of dependent arising, we see that there is nothing that could be more wonderful than that.
하고서라와 오다 롱와 로지지 접바 너그주사 지 스테네 만두 지보스 스테네 만두.
There's not even one iota, there's not even one little bit of inherent
다
existence.
대주셨다 맞는 대시 다 파시에 그러와 아거서와
Re
어때이자
gonda nga inji di go thong sun di donda di pet
인지
ni
딱
dorda ho.
맞는 대시 작은데
Re
왔으니
lasa lasa.
아거서와 어다 때 할래비 야채 첨부 다 델리네스 야채 바 네스 요가지 라야면 되다고
There is nothing better that we could praise. There is nothing that we could exceedingly praise more than this idea of dependent arising.
어다 라마 총가 바 코라이나 tum바도 또야 tum방만 하고 요아리 tum바도 땡주만 하고 요아리 이나요 tum바 땡주고 땡주 tum비 조 냐마지 샤비가 근데 할래는 디테바도 비비바레스
And keep in mind when Lama Tsongkhapa actually composed this praise. In terms of emptiness, he had already cultivated a pretty good understanding of emptiness. In terms of dependent arising, he had already deeply studied and had some realization of dependent arising. But it was at that moment where he saw this union, this intersection of emptiness and dependent arising, and how they assist each other and how they elevate each other. That is when a sun of understanding really arose within his mind, and that is when he composed this praise to the Buddha.
냐마지르다 그런가 노지다 고아시르 주주데비가 검자리 데야 따따 데비가 저 로지 메바 따기를 치강가 메바는 많이 봐 저마 노지 집하게 줘 도바지 노아샤게 되네 할레송레스
So, for example, at one moment when he was studying these scriptures on emptiness, Gyuma Tagenjwa,
저마 노지
저마-
치강가 베드 메바는 많이 봐 로지 집바 때네 메바 용도지 노아샤게 되네 할레송레스
he had this idea that all phenomena, they are a little bit like illusions, in that every phenomena has this illusion of inherent existence, but there is no pinpointable inherent existence there whatsoever.
어디서와 어다 tum바 땡주고 땡주 tum비 조스 데한테 지선 좀비 요거 저러고 라마지산이라 다테 조소 토고 말레스 저러고 소소고 고자 소소고 라마로 소타 치네 칼레칼 용그레스
And also, in terms of this understanding of the union of emptiness and dependent arising, actually, Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom, he told Lama Tsongkhapa directly, you're not going to be able to get this instruction from any guru, actually. You're not going to be able to get the instruction of the union of emptiness and dependent arising from any guru. You have to build the understanding yourself through training in study and meditation. That's the only way you're going to be able to get this.
코로가 좀면 코로가 라자야 되지 칼레칼레 때 냐드 때문냐네 용용소노 돈에 디고 조시 그레스
And he said that as an assisting factor, right, to the labors that you do to bring forth your own realization, write down the advice I, Manjushri, have given, and from time to time look at it again and reflect upon it again.
그래서 선디치엘라 때는 때반저지 예드뭐 신인도 와서 단계 뜻이 들어가로다 다 땡주 손지 쪼된데 그 땡주 치강가 땡주 수바 이자 다 손지 쪼로 짜신 버랜드 세대 제바이나 예대 등에는 로그를 마도 예께 예대 순게 예대 가르먹이 가르라바 이나 예대 체정에는 로그만 있어
So when he says that there is no other genuine way or no other true way of praising you other than this, what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying is that really the best thing, the most amazing thing about the Buddha is his teachings that help one to uncover the union of emptiness and dependent arising. So that is the most genuine praise, far more valuable than praises talking about the qualities of his holy body, his holy speech, and his holy mind, for example.
그래서 어다 던디지 이자 땡주세야 대다 버게 똥바도 땡주니 너도 돈에 집에 졸지 샤토바이나 어다 쇼바도 니지 쇼주지 세도 간조 고자세야도 간가 요는 요바 로지진은 매바 다 던디지 쇼는 던디 다 레베 야sem부지야
So when we are able to realize this union of emptiness and dependent arising, we can understand how any of those conventional objects, and we can talk about, conventional or relative makes it seem like they're not important, right? But that can also be talking about things like love, compassion, bodhicitta, and so forth. So we can talk about those as gonda konso rangjingi drupa maresine.
이나이 대원 역시 고사는데 아니 어다 타바는데 쇼주지 세는데 어메가만데
They don't exist inherently, but at the same time, they exist in a relative way. which means that they can be brought forth. Love can be brought forth in our continuum. Compassion can be brought forth in our continuum. Bodhicitta can be brought forth in our continuum. And they can be perfected. To really be able to understand how that works, that lack of inherent existence, and at the same time those possibilities, the union of emptiness and dependent arising is very important.
똥바용 하고 땡주요 하고 하고 살아와 다 니가 하고와 이나 둘을 둬야 돼 델레죠 다 깔래 카와서 요아레스 똥바 하고 차와지 땡주 하고 차와지 똥바 땡주고 땡주 똥비 둘을 차와대 레라고 요도요 말레스.
It is said that in terms of realizing and understanding emptiness, in terms of realizing and understanding dependent arising, the understanding of those individually arises more easily than the understanding that understands the profound relationship between dependent arising and emptiness, and how dependent arising assists emptiness, and how emptiness assists dependent arising. That is more difficult to realize than either of them individually.
다 같이 뭐 많이 다 내서 똥바 땡주고 좋은 줘야 돼. 아니 똥바 하고게 세티게 땡주 하고 게 세티게 똥바 하고서 대로용 말했어.
And so we could ask, does that mean that the mind perceiving emptiness, 톰바니 삼로탕야기 셈디, that mind that is perceiving emptiness is also perceiving dependent arising, or that mind that is perceiving dependent arising is also perceiving emptiness? That's not exactly it. That's not what we mean by them assisting each other in this sense.
이거 땡주 제바도.
Ale.
땡주 제비 다티가 똥바 제바 대우 조시바데 마레스.
갱하서 응마테스 콜 개치셔고 레디 콜라 백깔레 가보디. 영결선다.
똥바 달라소나 되게 땡주 제바도.
Ale.
땡주 라바도.
라바당.
땡주에서 라소나 되게 똥바 라바 데르베스 대우 마레스.
Is it that when we hear the word emptiness uttered, we also are able to immediately think of dependent arising? Or that when we hear the words dependent arising uttered, we are immediately able to also think about emptiness? That's not it exactly either.
다원아 조시도 때다 니한테 레라워치야도 다 히.
레라포스나.
아니야, 괜찮아. 그거 먹겠어서 니님은 좀 빼나 투인데. 투인데. 아저씨에서 성월이라고 그래서. 투인데 코로 집어로 도가 내발라 로요 말에 잘라바이나 디 잘로 ತ가로 찔 때마다 건도고 야레스
sig바데
이데 토데 와리나 치세로와 세시오스 코로이나 데바데 코로로 로요 말에 잘라바이나
그래서 톡치보이나 고마사
사그르와스 계산했더니 야 코로 로요 말에 잘라바이나 찔 때마다 건도고 디와스
okay. So if we were, he's getting a little bit he's getting a bit annoyed, but I like to make sure I have these analogies correct, right? Because if I misunderstand, I'm going to mislead you guys, and that is my negative karma. So I'm not willing to take that on. He says, like, when I explained this to you before, you said you understood. I was probably doing something else. You know how it is. So, anyways, but I do think I understand it now, so I can share it with you. If we talk about a roof, right? We understand that a roof is what is at the top of the house, but we understand that the roof cannot support itself. So we understand that there also has to be something underneath that roof together with it.
하고서 디다텔라 때니 코코로 데발로 오요 말에 사티 세티가 코젠다 질 때마다 라가 말에 쇼들레 차와레.
So we understand when we hear roof, we understand that a roof can't abide independently, right? It would just fall flat to the ground. So we hear roof, and in our mind we know that that roof depends for its support upon the walls or whatnot. So the relationship, the assisting factor between the dependent arising and the emptiness is something like that. So do we understand now how that assisting or how that enhancing relationship is between the two? It's a little bit like that example. And also we understand that if the roof has to perform its function, based upon the support of that other factor. It arises as the roof. We label it roof, partly based upon its function. And it arises as roof, partly based upon the things that hold it up. Then what else do we understand? The roof is not independent. It is not independent of other things.
매매 거대워 당에 다니야 릴라버치 저 있게 잘해. 갈래서는 또 뚱바 땡줄 또 라파 릴라버치 로기 하레스.
So a coarse understanding of this relationship between emptiness and the assisting factor of dependent arising can be understood in a simple way through analogies, right?
지 고통바이나 깨라 침보지 하레스. 지 고통바스 달라마 자침보 깨라 침보지 그 빼가려 여기 하세나 당이 알은 저한테서 도 차러왔어. 빼낭이 것이 바치 토란돌 사고는 내가 지가 요나. 사고는 내가 지가 요나.
제.
하고서와. 대릉에 가서 내가 지고 가서 유로지 잘라바이나.
야.
하고서와. 니 것이 바티 니 뱀볼 깨자 저거 잘라바이나.
야.
사고다 볼라.
야.
하고서와.
하고서.
나를 롬에 잘라바라왔어.
야.
하고서. 롬에 잘라바트가 게 예질 땜바테. 저들레 차와레스.
Yes. So another example. This example doesn't really do it for me, but I think I understand it. So hopefully, if you guys don't understand, by the way, there's questions after. You can say, Ngodrup did a lousy job of translating this example, Geshe. What does it mean? So we might have to come to that point, but I'll do my best. So if Geshe wanted to Toronto Choboke Tangana
어다 가서 지 요로지 지슈 잘라바이나.
Yeah.
나라 롬에 자 길레테 자수나.
Yeah.
하고서.
Teneko ko pompo sakangi pompo chik do.
땜보질 땜바테 하고 차와레스.
Ale. So, if Geshe wanted to invite a friend of his from Toronto, from the city, to come and visit us here in Burlington, in the suburbs, but then the friend told him that maybe I have to ask my
나 롬에 잘라바이나스.
that if the friend told him I lack freedom or I'm not able to do that, then in Geshe's mind, then
다 되냐? 대중알 롬에 잘라서 간저 로지지 매 자달라 라야 된다고 쳐서와스. 대가롱게 잘로라 예질 땜바테 하고 차와레스.
he'll say, I lack freedom. So from hearing that, Geshe will know that his boss at the restaurant is not letting him come. So he knows that his ability to arrive here in Burlington depends upon that boss at the restaurant.
하고서.
So
세시워서 롬에 자 다가롱기 길 땜바테 저들레 차와레스.
we understand that his lack of freedom is a dependent arising resulting from his relationship with his boss.
다때 알로잖아 지바레스. 가서 지쇼 잘라바이나. 엉이 나 코르펜볼 따 그래 잘라바이나. 디바타가롱기 롬에 사테 쇼들 용기와레스.
And it also works the other way around. If Geshe were to invite him and he were to say, I have to ask my boss, right? Depending upon him having to ask his boss, Geshe would understand that he doesn't have the time or he doesn't have the freedom. So that's how we can kind of understand that relationship. So this relationship of either mentioning the boss or mentioning the lack of freedom, and from hearing either of those things, also understanding that that second thing is also in place. This is said by the lamas to help us understand the assisting factor between emptiness and dependent arising. But Geshe said that he said that when he was looking at this example, he thought, okay, maybe this is difficult for folks and they might not really get it, which is why we have the example of the roof and the wall, which is the example I prefer actually, because I think it's easier. So the roof and the wall, right? So this is this awareness of how that mind focusing on emptiness is also assisted by any understanding of dependent arising, and how that mind focusing on dependent arising is also assisted by any understanding of emptiness. if we are able to understand the assisting factor relationship, what kind of benefits does that bring to us?
ngaroso kange te de se danza mari ba zo shibe nyamo kage ge yeten yekoro sono to anojin meba.
We'll be able to understand that this ignorance grasping at the self, the way that it perceives objects and phenomena, is not based on reasoning, that it is mistaken.
예 내서 요키르진 치르진 매먹이 봐. 시워치 샤야지 와레.
But at the same time, that doesn't mean that things do not exist at all. We see very clearly, right? They arise and they are able to perform functions.
된다 팀 하고 그슨 로그사 팀도 그거 알아.
So that's kind of where we want the understanding to go.
된다 지레. That is it 야셀 샤야요.
So hopefully, slowly we can come to an understanding.
그래도 그렇게 집을 이렇게 하고 그런데 하고 마시는 거
He's saying like, I'm pretending not to understand apparently, but no, like this stuff is hard, right? Is it just me? So we will dedicate the merits, and then we will open for questions. Of course, people who need to get on with your day, please feel free, but if you'd like to hang for questions after, you're absolutely welcome. So don't just put it off thinking it's difficult. Geshe said we tried to think about it again and again, and we ask questions, right, to come to a better understanding. Jida Kemba Dang Kundu Zombo Deyon Dejinde Deda Gongi Jesu Dalo Chir Gewa Dida Tangje Radungo Disa Jebe Gewa Tangje Ge Ngowa Ganla Jodu Ngabade Dagi Ge Tsawa Digo Jong Zombo Sheshe Radungo
로제 관계 가로서 게 네팔 때는 로제 관계가 다 랭이 관계 지요바이네 대파 중도야 매워서 봐야지.
Through the force of our positive merit today, may any negative karma that we have accumulated and its potential for obstacles be completely cleared away. Through these merits, may all sentient beings, all 6 types of beings within samsara, be kind to each other and assist each other. May I myself be able to help this come about through these merits. So we'll pause there. So we can turn on the volume and welcome any questions.
I have a question. It's Yulisa. I just was wondering, like in the preliminaries, renunciation is listed as 1, right? And and I was just wondering if Geshe could give a little bit of an understanding of like renunciation, because I feel like I'm, even before I can do bodhicitta, I feel like I need to have a more understanding of renunciation.
Nganso ngonrogi nanglolaya roa chik ngenjung chik redua ineko ngenjungi donda gyabo hako gyomares roa dene nganso jangchu gisem lebiala tambo ngenjungo giredua. Can I just say one thing, Yulisa?
Sure.
Renunciation is like actually a lousy translation of this word. It started in the 1950s that one person translated that, and so everyone uses that. But actually the Tibetan word is ngepar jungwa. So nge means definite, and jungwa means to emerge.
So
So that's think definite emergence. Yeah, Geshe was like, yeah.
하고서라서 다 알레르마 동보 녀솔지 데 노기슈나 체네 레몬드 소다시 첨보레드 데레 인지면지 타와스 그건도 세나 인주 대원 인주 여보지레시다.
So Geshe was saying that when we think, and you'll see why I like the word translated this way, because it relates to what he said. When we think about, I don't want to go to the lower realms, but if I never want to have to worry about going to the lower realms at all, I must definitely get out of samsara. I must emerge from this state of samsara. That's what the mind of renunciation is, definite emergence. And that's actually the best kind of renunciation or definite emergence. It's that wish to get out. So another way to bring forth this mind is to think about samsara generally. We can think of the three realms. We develop our understanding of the desire realm, which is where we all are. We see how we have disappointments and problems. But we know that even the form realm, even if we get to the formless realm, eventually we will face problems and we will have to go back down again. In this way, we can think, I don't want to have to be reborn within any abode, any place within samsara whatsoever. I must definitely emerge. I must definitely get out of samsara. That's that mind of renunciation. And another way to think about it is think about it from our experience. I've been reborn as a human being, which is one of the best rebirths in samsara. If we have a knowledge of the teachings, we can think, but also, even if I were reborn as a god, as a deva, I still wouldn't have a lasting, meaningful happiness from merely achieving that higher rebirth. Therefore, I must get out of samsara. So the mind that thinks, the happiness that I experience in samsara, that's not good enough. I need to have a happiness that is lasting and completely untouched by suffering. The only way to achieve that is to get out of samsara and to be liberated, to emerge from this situation. That is also the mind of definite emergence or renunciation. So a mind striving towards liberation is the measure of samsara. A mind striving towards emancipation is the measure, not the measure of samsara, is the measure of renunciation, of definite emergence. So that is the very best mind of renunciation or definite emergence. Yeah. The problem is we have goosebump-like renunciation. And it's called goosebump-like renunciation because when we go out in the winter and we're cold for a little bit, we get those bumps on our skin, but as soon as we get back inside, those bumps go away. So our renunciation, our definite emergence is not long-lasting. That's the problem. Yeah. So don't have goosebump-like renunciation is kind of like an essential instruction from the great masters. Yeah. And don't have goosebump Dharma practice at all, like, right, where one day you're just like over the moon and inspired and studying and practicing, and then the next day it's kind of like a flop and you're not doing anything, right? We want continuity, right? That's really important. So hopefully, Yolisa, that answers your question a bit. Are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead. It's Kimberly.
Hello.
Hi, Geshe Sonam. Hello, Venerable Ngodrup. Thanks for your teachings. So back in the when I became disabled, a couple of years ago, whatever, I was extremely bitter. I'm still bitter some days, but I came to realize that I have all the time in the world now for Dharma practice. But I'm still lazy. How do I overcome this ridiculous laziness? I mean, all I have is time. But still, I'm like, yeah, maybe I should go alphabetize my spices first. How do I get my mind to behave itself?
My grandma used to love alphabetizing her spices. That's a good
Me
memory.
too. I'm very organized.
그 단다 원보 균chen 차송 랑마 카플라테 나송 타 치로라 드로투기면 되스 응마가 할레페 초보인 삼송이 네 단다 로아 코 융기 포라기레 두아 레케 체고 마레로아 코 단다 투츠마톡 mendu스 로아 잠볼링기 투츠 차상와 모랑기 락팔라 예레스 로아 이네 삼삼 녜디 안데슬라그레 치 냠렌치아기 도바디 chetugi omare o chichenange cupboard draftik sona di kiware du samgeres di kanes peshetange yapo peshetange gisemdi kandes kego
매매매 다 대돈 저거 와서 더 처음에만 너도 처음에 말지 그때에서 그것도 약 치던다 와서서 오니까 급하게 대해서 기워서 되는 거 그랬어.
네.
그래서 왔던데 지소노도 소때도 때문에 거가 야보든가 쇼바도 니지세도 그게 저도 그만 집안도 주서야 내가 소때 이소노도.
So it may be counterintuitive, but Geshe-la's first advice to you would be try to experience a little bit of joy or a little bit of happiness. So it's difficult being stuck there, right? Even if you have all the time in the world. So do something that brings you joy. If you do something that brings you joy, this could create some space in the mind where you're not having all of these distractions, or you're not having some depressed thoughts. Then you can bring forth that wish to do Dharma practice again. And then you establish a firm intention that I'm going to practice love and compassion today, and I want that love and compassion to be mixed with my mind like milk and water mixed together.
단다 강에 태야 돼. 다시 시와 이만에 봐서 강에 강가 보게 주야가 거럽게 강같이 흉하지라고 소나 또도나 쟁엘 로드 좋아서 안 좋아요.
And also in terms of your like disability and your health issues, really one of the most powerful realizations that you can have is to think that so think through experiencing these health issues, I am able to purify right now in this life so much negative karma that may otherwise have caused problems in future lives. I'm able to purify and move through this right now. And in this way, you can have like a taking the obstacle into the path sort of approach. And that's a great way to use the time. So in terms of the health issues in particular, trying to just change the way that we perceive them, instead of seeing them as a problem, see them as a practice, right? This is my practice to change the way I think about this. So Geshe-la was remembering about somebody in the monastery who he had some kind of illness, and then it gave him serious mobility issues, like basically kind of like paralyzed from the waist down. And people saw like kind of know how his body was ravaged, and they said, oh, it's so terrible and we're taking pity on him. And he said, no, it's actually okay. Through experiencing this difficulty now, I have purified so many potential causes of going to the unfortunate realms of existence. And in this way, he was able to take the obstacle into the path. So when we're experiencing problems, health problems, mental problems, whatever those problems may be, we can think of the problems as being like garbage. And the experience of that suffering is being like a fire hose. It's letting us move through that garbage and clear it away so that we never have to experience it again. We can think about it like that. Yeah, so Geshe said a bit of a long answer. Anyway, sorry, but I think Yulisa and Kimberly both got pretty good answers. So.
Yes, no, oh, yeah, that's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. I had some tears there. That was just so deep. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome, Kimberly. I do see a hand. I think it may be Andrea, but I'm not sure. Do you want to go ahead, Andrea? Go for it.
It is connected, but it might be a bit rambling because I'm not very good with words. But like, I feel like we can have like a really deep belief. That's why we're here. Like we're motivated, like quite powerfully underneath, and then we can have like a like an easily distracted, maybe a weaker, ordinary life. So like for me, like my issue is I'm definitely like deeply motivated to do the Dharma, but like ordinary life doesn't feed that necessarily. I can't necessarily bring like my faith into ordinary life. So one is like, how do I connect that? And also like the way, and then what I want to know is this the right way? So like I'm trying to see like every different angle on this as like a cleaning cloth of my dirty windows. So like compassion and and all these things, but I'm trying to make them really ordinary. So like it's like we said today, like being kind to a fly, or being compassionate to somebody, but also learning how to have like self-care within, so you have self-respect. So I guess what is quite a lot I would love to talk about here, but I'm just wondering like how can we make all of these like really high words like like bodhicitta and stuff like this, how can we make them really like ordinary and practical so that I can like see them around me in my daily life? Does that make sense?
Yes. No, I think I got you, Andrea. Yes. Nganso di mitsegi nanglola rwa chitang nganso samsam chu nganso di chu di nangshin mutune jamso bardu dapo chik so gores rwa balap nangshin ma sos rwa ine chichena nganso chula yiche tempo chik yores rwa nganso kunlong tempo chik yores ine nganso mitsegi nanglola rwa kunlong dang tunpe droyala tes kale kapo chik redus dene nganso kunlong di chik yuna ine nganso mitse nangla namtok matok mena kandes chik sanglo tang gogire duas nganso tsik topo denso di jangshum gi sem dang yang tapi tawa dang denso samsam chik ra konso halepe topo res nganso mitse nangla kind of like kul mitopa di kandes chik sogores ane nganso di kunlong yapo nyarya ine yang rangi sem dapo nyarya ruang tang ma chea di kandes chik sogores triwadiri
mem ta ya ta di ka ko so wa te dembo re so te i chang nganzo tangi ni tangi ke chamo shi so was pena nganzo tanda yoke ko so ya e ne wa go chu pares alhele chine konso sele ina yo 소설 치가르 메데와 지스나 기본 was.
So I don't know if you're going to like this, Andrea, but just because of a conversation we had recently. But so Geshe said that you're right. You're right. It's true. Like we are kind of like talking about these high ideas. And he said that this isn't advice that's just for you in particular. It's actually advice for everybody, actually. But we need to start with the people that are in our lives right now. Who is in our life that is the most difficult that we can start to work with, that we encounter with the most? And can we just start to think, no matter how we may feel about the person, that they want happiness just like I do? Can we start to do that?
Yeah, but I don't think that's what I mean. I think what I mean is about sort of like bringing faith, but maybe I'll just shut up now because I know
no. He's going to tell you more. You don't have to shut up. It's all good. It's a conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so what he's saying about the high words like love and compassion, that is really hard. And how do we do that in daily life? So maybe we have to think about how we're already doing something. Maybe there's an opportunity where you could have harmed somebody, but you chose not to, right? So you then refrained from harm. Maybe there was a place where you were able to bring them some sort of happiness. So you did something small to bring them happiness. So in that way, you're making those high principles, love and compassion, usable in your life in a small way.
다 녀모 가르슈체가 용거요나요. 또 데니를 다 데데 뉴르 돈을 다른 바지도 노야레스. 간도 강가지 바라was.
And if from day to day you're seeing in your life that, okay, I'm like doing these little things, and those little things are helping my afflictions be just a bit lighter, you're actually doing fine. You're actually really doing fine.
노다 용거레스. 노다 용도 용간조 단다 알레 녀모 강가요 아레 버거로 디파마 용이 르바지도 용거요 아레스. 레비카나 녀마니 말까지 데데 녀모 또지드라고 가제트 레카시 봐. 좀마조요 손도 그래.
And also to understand that mistakes are going to happen and that that's okay. Because all of us make mistakes, and that it's because of those mistakes that the Buddha taught the four opponent powers, that he taught about purification. And so in this way, just kind of using all of the tools that we have, right?
먼저 단다 라마조 명화조 그사 조지가 롱갈 펜도르 녀마니 말 디파트니 슈소나 디파트지 카드파 좀마조 다 저기 하레스.
Yeah.
라마 카시 녀네 다 카드 저기 말 갈레서는 되게 와다오치 라바레스.
Yeah, and so I'm sure that you've heard this story too. I'm sure you're familiar with it. The story about Atisha, right? As soon as he did something wrong, he would jump off the horse and do a confession kind of like right then and there. And a lot of his friends thought that it was like a little bit weird. And they're like, it's okay. Like you can confess at the end of the day. You don't need to like kind of stop going where you're going. Like you can wait until the end of the day and confess it.
델라베카레 라미레 가르자바레스. 순이 녀마데 셰와시마니 신주하고 말레스.
But then Atisha's answer, of course, was, I don't know what I'm going to see first, the sun of tomorrow's sunrise or my next life. So I just want to be on the safe side, right? So also activating the opportunities we have in that way.
메클로도 다 대지 가제 자치보체 로사타 다른 바제데 센제레네와사 다 가제 자치르도 야르도 가라와스.
So his advice, Andrea, is just keep that vast motivation you have and know that that's already something really great. And then just step by step, try using those little principles as you go throughout your life with that vast motivation.
당간조 강가지 바레 소소가 편바드사가 센제지 노미인한테 그래 할래야만 세이나 산이제 치이나레 던도이나레 노미이나레 다 설가워지게나 설여버지게나 대 노지 센제 유절 제토나 간디야보 디노자 알레 사고야레스.
And think of all the things that you do for your kids. Think of all the things that you do for your family members. And think about how you're trying to bring them happiness because of this mind of love you have. And just wish that just as I'm able to help them in this way with their problems right now, may I be able to help more and more people like that. And wouldn't it be great if even one day I could help all sentient beings like that? Just thinking like that.
So guess thank you. And also like, so really it's like, so when you're sitting in the presence of Buddha, like when you've got your field of merit up, these ordinary actions are worthy of being there in front of the Buddhas.
Dene nganso di tsokshin di sel tabna roa, dene sangye dang jangshu sempo yore, dene nganso gewa chung denso, kongso ya pulna digirebes.
이도 야 개와 비추지 막 개와 야 내지 마도 마사바이나 야 페나 코르스티니 기초사도 고츠고도 아버지게도 스티니가 알아봤어.
They're absolutely worthy because even if the positive thing that we have done may seem insignificant like a particle of dust to us, to the Buddhas, it shows that we're trying. It shows that we're trying to accumulate what is positive, that we're trying to purify what is unwholesome. And that is never not important. And that is always a cause for the Buddhas to be rejoicing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
만원씩 줘요 말을.
He put you on the spot there. Geshe is asking Manoshi. Manoshi happens to be here today. He's asking if she has a question, but you don't have to have one, but if you do.
It was actually related to when I thought of it when Yolisa was speaking and the renunciation, direct emergence or renunciation. And I remember watching a talk by Lama Geshe many years ago. and he said there is no bodhisattva without renunciation. So, I mean, maybe this is a very simple question, an obvious question, but I thought it'd be interesting to hear Geshe talk about the relationship between definite emergence and definite emergence and bodhicitta.
Did everybody hear the question? Because I got feedback yesterday that from our class when the audience asked questions, folks couldn't hear. So could people hear Manoshi's question? It's soft. Okay, so I'll try to summarize her question just so people can follow. So Manoshi was remembering a teaching from Lama Geshe, where he said that there is no bodhisattva without renunciation, or there is no bodhisattva without definite emergence. So like, why is that, or how is that true, right? Basically.
Yeah, I just speak about the relationship between the two, because they're, as Geshe said, they're two of the preliminaries, and how are they related? I mean,
so to understand more about the relationship between renunciation and bodhicitta, and to understand why you need that renunciation to bring forth the bodhicitta. Nganso di nguma Lama Geshe Rinpoche di nganso di jangchub sempa seria di ngenjung mena jangchub sempa yoma res. Dene konso ni ngundro la yotsang roa dene di ngenjung dang jangchub gisem drewa kande chik yores. Ane ngenjung mena jangchub sempa kare chene yoma res gidu.
단 어테렌도 왔어. 손주세 용하셔발라 지 쪼나버데 이지 그거야. 이지 첨부.
So this relates to what the main cause of bodhicitta is. So we could say that the main cause of bodhicitta is great compassion, right?
단 이지 첨부 삐도 버서 용하셔발라 예 선제 통제 잘라기 왔어.
And what do we need as the object of reference to bring forth great compassion? We need as our object of reference all sentient beings, right?
예 선제 통제 거로 거의 거등에서 등화 요소를 좋아시기 선비 선세대 용하셔발라 소소그 뛴데 딘에서도 손을 돈내라 텔레 타와지 그건데 선비로 땜보지 매나 근데 좀 좋아하는 거세요.
And so having others as our object of reference for that great compassion, what do we need to think? Oh, they're experiencing so many problems within samsara. They are experiencing so much suffering within samsara. That's not acceptable. I need to get them out of samsara. But if we don't have underpinning that a deep comprehension of our own situation in samsara and wanting to get out of it, wanting to emerge from that, right? That factor of renunciation, we won't be able to have that for all sentient beings.
하고서라와 소소그 뛴데 등화서가 나서도 여보 다 텔레 좋아지 그건데 손바텔 민주 예 선제 요조 그때인데 대치바레도 손노톤에 텔레 타wan데 바텔 다 니지.
So my wish for myself to be free from the three types of suffering is the mind of renunciation or definite emergence. My wish for all sentient beings to be free from those three types of suffering by definitely getting out of samsara, that is great compassion.
어떤 이지 코로프게 용하셔발라 이지면 소소그 뛴데 때모지 그것도 왔어.
So if we don't have an appreciation, sorry, I don't want to say appreciation, that's such a bad word. If we don't have an understanding of our own suffering and a wish for that to end by getting out of samsara, how can we have compassion for sentient beings by wishing to see an end to their suffering? So that's how it fits together, yeah?
다시 어떤 리스 왔어. 다시 그 이제도 뒷바로 바르세는 뭐 코르바 다다도 그건데 왔어.
Yeah. So we need, like, you know, Lama was absolutely right in that we need to have that from our experience in that context of renunciation before we can bring forth that as a bodhisattva for other sentient beings.
다 나로서 강가 소소자치 뭐이다 소소그 뛴데 이원 내가 요 땐데요 왔어. 이원 때에서 야 타니 워레스.
And to develop that feeling, that experience of really wanting to get out, of really wanting to get out of that suffering, when it's personal, it's more powerful, right? So if we've experienced that wish for ourselves personally, it's going to be a lot easier to wish it for other sentient beings.
어떤 예티도 로자이나 대피도 버치고 돈이 다야 다발로 로야레스 고추사.
And that mind of definite emergence, that mind of renunciation is so powerful that it can get beings out of samsara, right? The hearers and the solitary realizers, it is mainly through that they get out of samsara.
that is siwonda
Yes. So the relationship between the two is very important, actually.
yeah.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Can I hear a bit more about relative bodhicitta and ultimate
Yes.
bodhicitta?
Yeah, so the question is wanting to hear a bit more about the relative and the ultimate bodhicitta. Nganso di kunsop jangchub gisem dang dundam jangchub gisem kandes chikresa.
there that take picture 동기 가야 들어와 그도 전주지 세선 다 단단한 것이 대한테 생제 강가 자침부 돈을 대덕에 제등가 다 소양가 나세야 손주산 로이 손별로 되라 그도 전주기 세
So relative bodhicitta is really kind of what we were talking about a little bit earlier, in the sense of like, I want all sentient beings to be free from suffering and to experience happiness. In order to do that, I want to be able to achieve Buddhahood so that I can lead beings to that same state. That's what we call relative bodhicitta. Yeah.
그래서 다 대여받지 좋아 대여받지 생제
So having that feeling of wanting to achieve Buddhahood for all beings,
디체트 세나만도 다 보게 나자 말이 봐 매바조 액체트 세나만도 뚱바니 가세서 노토나 다 될 때도 존지세 뇨레세 주야레스
so with that wish, I want to achieve Buddhahood to be able to free all sentient beings, which is that relative bodhicitta. With that wish, thinking, in order to do that, I must realize emptiness and uproot ignorance grasping at the self. That is ultimate bodhicitta.
아그소 다 시란이 세요레스
And so it's incorporating the method side, right? Wishing that enlightenment for all beings with that wisdom, knowing that to get there, you have to realize that emptiness.
다 대니 슈치르는 거의 자세 바로는 샤파와도 지나도 이세요레스
And actually, relative and ultimate bodhicitta, these are the two wings of the bird that are going to take us across this ocean, which is this mess of samsara, to that shore of complete enlightenment.
야 바디다 어만 집에 탈때요 와서 어만 집에 탈세나 어만 집에나
And that analogy, of course, comes from the glorious Chandrakirti's Madhyamakavattara, entering the middle way.
다 슈바니라 때는 거의 자세 바로를 끼워지는 로이 잘라요레스
And we can say that Geshe likes to emphasize, not only do these two wings of the bird take us to the other shore, but we have a happy flight. It's a happy flight to the other shore. Yeah.
야 뒤제
Is there one more hand? Yes, Marta, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you, Andrea, for your question, because it helped me to resolve something that happened me in the morning. Well, my question is the next. So then any phenomenon in this realm of desire on this planet is constituted by emptiness and dependent arisement. For example, to be born, to grow old, to eat, to get angry, to be happy, to walk, to rest, the good or bad relation with others, to work, to get sick, to create, as plants as born, the three poisons, to be here today, the Big Bang, individual karma or collective, everything has the emptiness and the dependent arisement, everything.
Yes, I will put that to Geshe Marta. Let's see what he says. Nanso, yes, that was like yeah. He's like, make sure you translate the answer good. It kind of reminded me of Lama Zopa Rinpoche a bit, the way you asked that question. Then nganso di tanda yopa degidi, nganso mi yopa degidi, nganso di gawa dang chiwa dang dungel chatsangwa nganso dewa kariyana, nganso di netso ningjepo yana, netso dogyepo yana, netso kariyana yang kochasangwa lao sanga lama lamna kotoba sagiti. Denso chatsangwa samlo tangna, denso chatsangwa tongpani dang tenchungi netso chik yerebesa.
야야야 대디면 자소를 지다 따듯어 소설 따와 이날에 저것도 호텔까지 따와 있는 가세리 저것도 여바지 놓아지요 아래서
Yes, they do. They all have that, but the best way to understand it is to take ourself to begin with, to look at our own situation and see, how do I view that self? And we'll see that immediately when we think of me or I, there's this idea that there's something pinpointable and solid. That comes up right away.
접어 콘트롤 접어시비가 시워지 하레스 오 콘트롤 접어시비가 오코 생각도 백인적 주사 여봐 시워지 노하샤기 하레스.
And if we take ourselves as a beginning, we don't just want to take ourselves anytime. We want to take it when we're experiencing a strong emotion, like attachment or anger. When we're experiencing that attachment or anger, we have this feeling that this I that's here is really real. It's something pinpointable. It's something that I can feel. Once we have this thing that there's something real pinpointable that I can point at, that I can feel, we've created something that isn't there. We've created something false that isn't even there at all. So when we see, where is that idea that there's something pinpointable, independent, solid, whether you're using yourself or any other of those objects that we mentioned, try to find where that's pinpointable. Then that mirage, that appearance, that pretend appearance will dissolve away naturally. The minute with whatever of those objects you mentioned or thinking of ourself, the minute that we start to say, well, where is that pinpointable thing? Where is that pinpointable thing? The minute we start to question that, already that solidity, that feeling that it exists independently is going to be less and less. And we can do that with our car. We can do that with the mountains. We can do that with a flower. We can do that with an experience. Any of those things, that thing that seems so real and so solid, we start to locate, where is that solid thing? Where is that real thing? So, of course, like, it's easier to start doing that by using ourself. That's the very easiest way to do it. Or thinking about a house or a car or something solid. When we start to talk about feelings and experience, the things that you mentioned, those truths, they still hold, but it's a little bit harder, right? So in the beginning, we think about these more kind of unitary, seemingly unitary, solid objects. And it's because it's hard to see feelings and experiences as empty, dependent arisings. Because it's hard to understand that, the Chitta Mantra, the mind-only school of Buddhist philosophy, they say, yes, like everything is lacking existence except the mind. So outer phenomena all lack inherent existence, but the mind exists. So while all of those things are empty, dependent arisings that you mentioned, Marta, yes, the best way to understand emptiness and dependent arising is to use ourself as the example, especially when we're experiencing a strong emotion. And ironically, those moments when we're feeling angry, for example, if we use the tool of emptiness and dependent arising, that's going to be an amazing opportunity for understanding. And when we see that object and we start to try to find its pinpointability, we see that there's nothing solid and independent at all. Behind that, we also see there's still something there, though. And that thing that's there is coming about because of many causes and conditions. It is a dependent arising. So love, compassion, bodhicitta, these are also all empty, dependent arisings. And if we can see that relationship of dependent arisings, that's going to be really powerful. both from the perspective of those negative things that we didn't wish we had to experience, and all those positive things that we want to experience or that we want to realize. Yeah. So without dependent arising, none of the experiences, things, or feelings you mentioned would be able to appear to us. Yeah. So that's Geshe-la's answer.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So thanks so much, Martha, and you're the last question for this Sunday, and we'll see everybody hopefully next Sunday. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you very much. That was great.
Thanks,
Jay,
Elisa.
Jay, no, thanks.
Take care. Bye, everybody.
Loved everybody.